your customers have things in their nature that they don't want to change, or they naturally avoid changing. And if something works okay, then they're going to stick with it. Even if you have something that's better, if it's only marginally better, they're not going to change. It has to be significantly better.
Startups with Stu is a podcast for anyone living or wanting to live the startup life, either as a founder or a team member. Your host, Stuart Draper, was a 9-time Inc. 5000 honoree before age 40. This show dives deep into the exhilarating world of entrepreneurship with guests that are seeking advice from Stu for their startup or business owners that want to share their entrepreneurial journey. Listeners always walk away with actionable ideas of what to do to take their startup to the moon. Startup life can feel like a roller coaster ride. And with Startups with Stu, you're likely to turn your roller coaster ride into a rocket ship ride. Get ready to uncover the secrets to startup success from visionary founders and savvy investors who've transformed groundbreaking ideas into thriving ventures.
Good day. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Gonzalo Tudela is here with us today. Gonzo, it's a pleasure. Thank you for joining me on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Stu.
You are the perfect stage entrepreneur for my show, in my opinion. You've got the business going. You've gained some traction. We'll talk about that in a little bit. You've been there and done that. It's not your first rodeo. So you have a lot of experience that will hopefully lead to some fun stories, some laughs, maybe some tears as you remember back to the harder days, and then also just some insights for our listeners. So Gonzalo and I met. I went to a conference. We got to meet in person. What was the name of that conference in San Diego we attended?
ASU GSV Summit.
ASU GSV Summit. It's like a major education technology summit. ASU stands for Arizona State University, and GSV stands for, I don't recall, but ASU GSV is the big long acronym for their cool conference in San Diego. If you're in the EdTech space, it's a good one to attend. You get to see a lot of the major players in the game. And Gonzalo has an EdTech startup. And so he had reached out to say, hey, I'd love to learn from you. Maybe there's ways that your company could utilize my technology. And so we checked it out. It is impressive what Gonzalo and team have done. So I remember when you were telling me your story, you were like giving me the genesis and background for how you came up with the idea for Examined. Tell everyone about that.
Yeah, so I had just finished selling my last startup and helping my wife and her family business. And it was kind of time where the pandemic hit. And the best time to go to school is in a recession or in a pandemic. Like when the world's kind of in that uncertain, it's like go to school. So we decided to pack up and move to Spain. And she went to do her MBA at IE University. And I remember so vividly, about a month and a half in, she came home one day and she said, I don't know what to do. And I said, what do you mean? And she pulls up her WhatsApp group chat and she's like, 85, 90% of the students in my class are cheating right now. They're using Chegg, Course Hero, Quizlet. Here's all the ways of getting around proctoring. And I'm like, okay. So, and she's like, no, I don't think you understand. I don't want to cheat. And if I don't cheat, I'm going to get crushed by the curve. Because some of the tactics that they're using is they're going to be giving us like 400 questions and, 30 minutes. And it's like, oh, you can't cheat that. It's a randomized pool. Well, it becomes an exercise of who can press Control F the fastest, right? It's not an exercise of actually what you know. And so I went down, and again, we were living in Madrid, and I went and grabbed a nice, beautiful bottle of Spanish Rioja wine, 10 euros. It was just perfect. And we sat down and we had what I would call one of those bonding moments that you have as husband and wife, where you talk about like your values, your life, like what, you've been married, we were married for under a year. We'd known each other for about 6, and we really got deep. And it came out that, you know what, like, who cares about grades? And I know that getting crushed by the curve feels bad. And then it really hit me when she said, no, it does not feel bad. It's that I'm not going to get an interview for investment banking, management consulting, or any of these top tier firms when I graduate from MBA, because they look at your GPA And then they go and like, here's a cutoff. We just don't have the ability to interview everyone. So it's a financial thing. And we chose values over finances at that point. We said, you know what, just don't cheat. And so she focused on learning the material. She really just focused on studying hard. And she ended up graduating valedictorian because the second half of the MBA was all applying. And that's where she just like skyrocketed past everyone because she actually had comprehension of the material. So that got me thinking like, okay, well, how bad is this problem? And so what I did was I from my last startup, I learned that like you have to talk to 100 people before you do a line of code. Like don't even think about coding your idea. Just talk to people, get outside the four walls. So I had this wonderful opportunity where I got to take students out to the bar after exams and talk to them, ask them what they were doing, how they felt, why they were cheating. And I had access to the professors. So I started talking to the professors, taking them out for lunches and just listening to the frustration. And I think that if you summarize, you know, and you ask a professor, what's the worst part of your job? They'll say designing, delivering, and grading student assessments. That's just the worst part of their job. And so then I started reaching out in the United States, Canada, and South America to different universities. And I just found that this problem is globally. It's a huge issue. And it was just skyrocketing.
Yeah, you mentioned, Gonzalo, these businesses, Chegg and Course Hero, Quizlet, like they're making hundreds of millions, if not billions, across those three businesses. And it's really mostly by supporting cheaters, right?
Yeah. And so, I mean, I understand the original intention. The original intention is imagine you're that student and you're trying to study and you just don't quite understand something and you need help and you want it on demand. It's like the night before your exam and you're just trying, you know, and that's the intention, is that on-demand support. Think that they were answering questions within 15 minutes, right? What it evolved into was, well, when I'm taking an at-home exam, I'm just getting on-demand answers to my exam questions. And so that's where it kind of was going. And at the time, you know, this was just before GPT-2 came out, where we're looking around what technologies are available. And I remember explicitly like pulling up the API, or not the API, pulling up GPT-2 with Johnny, our CTO, and seeing like what it could do. And then all of a sudden realizing like the whole world's about to shift. So we started to examine with the understanding of that assessment needs to change. How we assess students needs to change. How we assess people, humans, need to change, because it's going to be able to do everything. And we need to start working on this challenge in higher ed because there's a huge cheating problem. Now, along the way, we've got to learn a lot of lessons about the incentive structure within higher ed, how things are measured, the politics, why cheating is so big is not so much that students need to cheat. It's more so like they're not willing to stop it. It's like there's some fascinating lessons learned here. But really what I wanted to talk to you about was, you know, this is my first startup in higher ed and in EdTech. And I wanted to learn from you, like, what do you see as the barriers? How did you overcome some of these barriers? I mean, I've been able to identify LMS integration, privacy, security, HECVAT, SOC 2, that kind of stuff, as well as accessibility requirements. Those like technical hurdles. But then there's like, you know, one university is like, well, our incentive is to graduate as many people as possible, and academic integrity goes against that. So we can't do academic integrity. That's like, what? like, okay, so how do you get over that sort of inertia, that feeling, that model, where you're actively being told to turn off academic integrity things in your platform because they're catching too many people doing the wrong things? I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? So.
Right. No, those are real struggles. So you, just for the listeners real quickly, barriers to entry was a term that Gonzalo used. That is the things that make it hard for a business to be able to succeed when it gets started. So a barrier to entry, the most common barrier to entry in higher education is that you often make money twice a year as a business, once in September and once in January. And so if you only make money 2 times a year, a barrier to entry for new businesses is that they have to figure out how to pay their bills the other 10 months of the year when they're probably going to have very limited new income coming in, right? So that's a barrier to entry. Another barrier to entry that Gonzalo mentioned was you have all of these criteria like HECVAT and SOC 2, which is a security compliance. HECVAT is more of a compliance around, well, it's also security related, but it also deals with other parts of technological requirements that universities place on businesses that are going to support them, right? And so that's hard for new businesses to afford to spend a bunch of time, money, and energy innovating around how to qualify their technology for the university's demands. That's another barrier to entry in higher education. Another barrier to entry in higher education when you're starting a business for that to target that space is integrating with other technologies like the school's LMS system. That's the learning management system, or the SIS, the student information system. And so there's all sorts of barriers to entry in the higher education space. And Gonzalo is saying, hey, Stu, I'd love your input, your feedback on what matters. Where do I spend my time, money, and energy? Because I have limited resources, right? And so a barrier to entry, Gonzalo, today, by the way, what would you say is the biggest one you're seeming to run into when you're on sales calls?
I think there is, for everything, one of the two I'm running into on sales calls. I'd say number one is organizational inertia. So they've got this mindset that no, we do an exam, we do an essay, and that is the way we do things. And there is a required change that has to happen in order for us to get past. Like within a year, we're going to have agentic workflow bots coming in that are going to be doing just blowing your mind compared to what ChatGPT is doing. And I'm already seeing some of it now. The stuck way of this is how we do things. Or the second thing is that, well, I don't design assessments. I have a textbook, a test bank. I can't do it without that. Or that's what I use. There's not actually enough time for professors to design really good assessments. And so there's a time barrier. So there's this organizational inertia, this culture of that is it going to change or does it need to change? Does it even want to change? So I think that's one. I think the second is the incentives. So what we learned, we fundamentally tested two models, earned about $500,000 or more getting these two models. One was direct to institution, which is where we went through sort of administration, think of like teaching and learning. And the other one was through inclusive access and equitable access. And we kind of compared what were the sales cycles, what was the barriers to getting these done, and what was expanding. And so we found like going through the institution is just like going through cement. Like you need 10 people to say yes. They have no urgency. They don't care if the term starts or not. They're like, yeah, well, I'm going to get to my accessibility review in October. It's like, well, we just lost fall. Great. Thanks. Right. Going back to your 2 times thing, because there's no need to push something so strong, or there's a backload. So coming back to that element, we learned that going through the inclusive access, equitable access bookstore model was the best way to do things. But there is this notion of, well, content, are you a content provider? Because that's what they're used to licensing. Whereas we ask, well, what about Top Hat? Top Hat goes that way. What about Packback? There's other tools that are learning outcome tools. Right. And I think there's a great book called Make It Stick. It was written about 2012, somewhere around there, that talks about how assessment is actually one of the best and strongest ways to reinforce your learning. It is the process of going through that. So as we think about modern assessment, and as we think about sort of what I would call the organizational inertia and overcoming that seems to be our one of our big barriers. Less so with professors. Professors get it and want it and they run with it. But it's when like as soon as administration gets involved, it's like, okay, now we've added a boat anchor. Right. So that's what we're going through right now. And I don't understand why administration slows professors down.
Yeah, no, I feel you. Folks, whether you're in the education technology world or not, this is really important stuff to be considering. I'm going to share with Gonzalo like how this relates to the education space. And I think you'll find that it applies a lot of other places as well. But your customers have things in their nature that they don't want to change, or they naturally avoid changing. And if something works okay, then they're going to stick with it. Even if you have something that's better, if it's only marginally better, they're not going to change. It has to be significantly better. So for us at StuCant, we said, hey, check out our textbook. We update it twice a year. And they're like, a textbook? It's a textbook, period. It didn't turn heads. Even when we said we update it twice a year, which was what we originally did at StuCant. And in fact, when I said 2 times a year, we learned later that scared people because they were like, that means you're going to change it at Christmas time and you're going to ruin my Christmas vacation and I'm going to have to learn something new right before the next semester. Like, no, thank you. Right. And so we had to learn to do something that was really going to change and improve their lives substantially in order for them to want it. They did want the change once a year. They were happy with that. But a textbook by itself wasn't going to change things. A simulation that gave students this hands-on experience, and it made grading easier, and it designed the project for the homework for the semester. Professors loved that. That was a huge time saver for them. And so we didn't lead with, hey, we've got a new textbook for you. We led with, hey, we've got this cool simulation that you should check out. Will you check it out? Our salespeople could then talk to them because they were willing to check it out. And then from there, we could shift and say, and we have the textbook that goes with it. And it has the lesson plans. And it has the lecture slides. And it has the test bank. Okay, by the way, initially it didn't have those things, but professors kept saying, when are you going to add the test bank? It's got to have a test bank. And it has to have, and it was like, oh, okay, fine. We'll add that. We'll do that. At first we were like, gosh, you guys are lazy. Like, what else do you want us to do for you? Like, should we order your Uber for you to drive you to work every day? Like, what else do you want? Like, they're naturally inclined to look for the path of least resistance. They actually picked a career where it was going to be guaranteed they'd keep their job after they got tenure, right? 'Cause these are people that want the same. They don't want a lot of change, and they want security and certainty. And changing anything in the education world just rocks that boat, so they avoid it. What we found was that we had to find ways to quickly get to the people that could make a decision and decide to make change, that wanted it, because we were giving them something that was worthy of that change, right? And so for us, we could go direct to professor. And like you said, professors are on board. You're able to get them on board, but then the system doesn't sometimes allow for them to do what they want to do, right?
So I have an example where I have 17 professors at one university who've all said yes, they want it. And we are blocked at the associate dean and dean's office because they are too afraid of turning it on. So one of the things that we do is, if a student uses Chegg, Course Hero, or any of those websites without any installation of the software, without anything, we will find when they leak it and identify the exact person do it with more certainty than you would a fingerprint, right? And it's like, and that terrifies people, because it's like all of a sudden, you can go to, we're going to be like, here's the website on Chegg. Here's exactly the time, the exam it came from. This is the student it came from. And this is what they did. And here's the screenshot of them taking a picture with their phone, like that level of certainty. And they're too afraid to turn around. They're way too afraid to turn around because they're afraid of student backlash and the amount that they're going to find. We think that it's somewhere in the 60 to 65% of all content that's being delivered on assessments today is already leaked with answer keys online.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Gonzalo is here to save our world.
No. But I want to come back to this, is because that's what we led with. And we found a very small group of people that were like so morally charged that they wanted to fix this problem. But we found more people were actually terrified of it. Right.
Yeah.
But is that a substantial change that people want? Well, we're actually learning what they really want is a better student experience and to save time as a professor. So it's like, so our secondary benefits of the, sort of auto grading and, automation of the questions and all those components of it, that was now what we're starting to lead with, is we had to change our positioning. Right. And it's fascinating because, we've got our professors on the second semester, they spend less than 1 hour on all their assessments for all their courses when they use Examined. And that's what we lead with now, is it's the time savings, right?
The time savings. Now you've got their attention, right?
Exactly. So this is all part of learning. Your position, your product, your idea, your concept can kind of be the same, but it's like leading with the wrong thing can be detrimental in this space. Yeah, that's what we're learning.
Yeah. I think there's so much to be learned from that, because you can tell people, hey, my milkshake tastes better, but that's not what they care about. It's, can I get it fast? And I'm going to assume yours tastes better, and that's why I'm coming to you. But how fast can you give it to me? Like, all of a sudden, it's about time, not about the milkship, right?
Have you speaking of milkshakes, have you read Competing Against Luck?
I don't believe I have. No.
Clayton Christensen, it was the author, and he wrote this book called Competing Against Luck, and he talks about this concept called jobs to be done framework. And in there,
Yeah.
he explicitly uses the example of a milkshake. And he said,
he uses that in a different book too.
yeah.
It's called Innovator's
Innovator's
Dilemma,
Dilemma too, right? So, and I'm a little fuzzy, but it's something along the lines of they wanted to increase sales, and they found that people on their commute to work wanted something to fill the time and to feel full, to get them to, and he like kind of associates, and you would have never thought like milkshakes for breakfast was a thing, and they increased their sales 30% because of the job it could do relative, and so how it was positioned. And it's just a milkshake, right? Not that it tastes better, not that it is, healthier, or that it, is cheaper. None of that. It's just like, this is going to fit your commute for you. It was fascinating.
Right. And so you found the job that you're doing for professors is saving them time in designing, delivering,
and grading,
and assessing,
and grading, and secondarily to that, we can guarantee the reliability and the authentic academic integrity and all of those components, which in a differentiated way.
But man, isn't it sad that we live in a world today where they want to turn their head and ignore the academic integrity issue? Because Gonzalo, the original problem, and I think for every entrepreneur we have this, where we see a problem, we want to go solve it. The problem you saw was that there were cheaters, and they were holding your wife back from being able to succeed at the level she wanted to succeed. And you could think, well, professors are going to care about that. They're going to want to fix that. But then you realize they're not going to. They don't care about that. What they care about is time. Can you save me time? Can you do something easier? Can you help make my life easier?
Yeah,
right? I think some of them do.
Yeah. I wouldn't go that far, but more so as, let's imagine, and this is like, as an entrepreneur, you want to get this level of insight into your market. So let's look at the higher education system, right? And let's look at the top. And one of the things that they go to is they say, this is our acceptance rate. This is our graduation rate. Okay, so let's start there. So one of their KPIs, their key performance indicators of that organization, is how many students finish, how many students graduate. Okay, so now cascade that down into all the different level of things. And you have the second problem that's going on, which is if the students all know that this cheating is happening, and they all know that it's a joke, why isn't it being reported? Well, when you look at it, it's because the Academic Integrity Office is not resourced to proactively tackle the problem. They are there to support a faculty member who's given the accountability of the problem. So what does a faculty member do? They're like, well, instead of putting 10 hours in my time meeting and accusing and maybe going to a Senate to propose this, and then talking to this, and then having to build all the evidence of this academic integrity violation, because it's an accusation. And they have to go through like a court-like process.
Yeah.
Instead of doing that, I don't have time for that. So instead, I pulled a student in and said, hey, don't do this again. So it never gets officially reported. So if you start reporting, because it's so much easier to do so, all of a sudden you're going to make the university look like there's so much more cheating happening because they're underreporting. And all of the result of all that extra cheating is you're going to delay the graduation or reduce your graduation rates. So it kind of spirals all the way up to that one focal point of we graduate everyone kind of concept, and this overarching thing of accessible education stuff. And there's nothing wrong with accessible education. There's nothing wrong with inclusivity, anything that's great. But there is something wrong when we start reducing the rigor or reducing the bar consciously or unconsciously. We have to maintain quality, because in the end, people go and get a degree because, one, it opens a gateway to a better career, and two, because it's a proxy for your level of critical thinking and your knowledge on a subject matter. So employers use that to determine whether or not you can do this job. They use that proxy. Now that whole space is probably going to get disrupted over the next 3 to 5 years, especially with AI, right? So that's coming.
Yeah.
So fundamentally, the universities, in order to maintain the one value piece they have, which is the credential, they have to maintain credibility. I think right now that's in an erosion state. And so this is why, it's going to become more and more prevalent, but we have to think about the incentive structure. Does a professor have an incentive to put 10 hours into one academic integrity violation? No, right? Does the Academic Integrity Office have the resources to proactively try new things and work? No. Does the deans, provosts, and president's office have an incentive to stop people from passing a course? No. So we have to look at the
No.
system as a whole and realize that the positioning of academic integrity isn't going to work. And that's the lesson we've learned.
Yeah.
So now we're switching the positioning and seeing far more success with it. And that's part of the journey, right? This is all part of it happening.
The cool thing is you can still solve for the academic integrity thing over time.
Exactly. It's like, look, this is the secondary, this is the sort of byproduct, is you're going to have academic integrity, but it's not what we lead with.
I love it. Okay, so you shared a really funny story with me around you go on campus, talk to a bunch of students, and then go talk to the someone in administration. Tell me that story.
Yeah. Quick. So when we started this company, I was in Spain, my CTO was in Canada, and our chief academic was in the United States. So we would get together in person to do our planning for the year, or now we do it quarterly. And so one year we decided to go to one of the universities. It was nearby one of the founders. Again, names, I have to keep them all private. And we're there, and we're going to do our offsite planning at the university. So we booked a room, figured it all out, just like wanted to be immersed in what we're trying to serve. By the way, if there's any advice that I received in my career as an entrepreneur, get out of your four walls, get outside, go to where your people are. Anyways, so here we are, and we're planning, and we're kind of stuck on this kind of thing we don't know, don't have validation on, right? We're not quite clear if it's a truth or if it's an assumption. So I grabbed the team and said, okay, you guys go that way, I'll go this way, and let's just start talking to students. And within like half an hour, I think we talked to like 20, 25 students each. We just got groups and asked questions. Okay, so we understood. And later that day, we had a meeting with one of the people who were in charge of online proctoring, online learning. And the resounding thing was that students were saying how much they hated online proctoring. The camera in their face, how it affects your computer, slows things down, and how all these so easy to get around is a joke. And so then we were talking online learning. So how are things going? It's like, we've been using this proctoring system and everyone loves it. Our students love it. And I'm like, wow, it's so you're so fortunate to be able to, go downstairs and just talk to your students and figure this out and survey them. Like it's hard for, a startup to go and find these people. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, how do you know that they love it if you're not talking to them or asking them questions? It's like, we don't do that. It's like, what? So you're telling me they love it when I clearly have other information, and it's like, you got to dance around that discussion because people's egos and all that stuff. But it's fascinating how many people, and I encourage entrepreneurs, get outside the four walls, and how many people in their job won't even get outside their four walls, even though it's right there, one floor below them. They can talk to students and they won't do it. Right. It's just fun. It's just fascinating.
Yes. So important to go get out there and talk to them. So Gonzo, I am super excited about what Examined is going to go do to change the world. Thank you for being one of the brave ones willing to go and tackle a big problem like this. You are the type of person that can really go make a difference for good in the world, utilizing the technologies that can either be used for good or evil, right? And AI is one of those that's going to be used for both good and evil. I appreciate how you're using it for good. So thank you so much. In closing, if you were to give one last piece of advice, something you've learned from your time in entrepreneurship, what would that piece of advice be?
I'd probably leave two. So the first one is a quote. It's Aristotle or someone else. There's some argument online who it is. And it's, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is a habit, not an act. And so as you think about being an entrepreneur, great advice that I received, and I agree, is you got to be disciplined, and it's all about your habits, right? So that's one piece of advice. And then the second piece of advice, and I used to ask this when I was 20, and to people who are in their 40s, say, what advice would you give someone in their 20s now that you're 40 years old? And they said, take more action. Stop thinking about it. Gets out of your head and just do. Just get out and do, because you learn so much by doing something and having that didn't work, versus doing something and it working. Just get out and do, take more action. And it was across every successful person I talked to. They were like, yeah, I just wish I took more action earlier. That's it.
I love it. Yeah. Cannot agree more. Gonzo, offline, if you want to talk more about fundraising, I have some other ideas for you in that regard. I think you're at a great stage where you've gained traction, and the right investors will see it and be willing to take action now. But that's, something that we can discuss offline later. I wish you the best with Examine. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Stu. Take care.
Thanks for joining me on Startups with Stu. We have big goals to help millions of entrepreneurs. If you enjoyed this show, please take a minute to share it with someone else that needs to hear it, or leave a review. Remember, success is within reach for those who dare to dream big and take action. Until next time, keep pushing forward on your entrepreneurial journey.